As Ben Elton might say, ooh, bit of politics, but not really. So what am I talking about? The title of this video, can Reform members oust Nigel Farage? Well, yes, possibly, and there are two ways they could do that. One under their own party constitution, but also generally under company law. And that's what I'm going to talk about. It's more about the sort of interesting way they've actually set up the party and the implications of that. But what's brought this on? It's all this sort of a Rupert Lowe row. Now, just to full disclosure, I haven't really been following this, and to be perfectly frank, until Dan did some videos, I actually thought Nigel Farage, in my head I'd still had him that he was the head of UKIP, and I actually thought Rupert Lowe was the head of Reform, and that's why they were rowing. But I did watch some of Dan's videos, so now I actually know a little bit more about it. And as you probably know, they're having a little bit of a row at the moment, and Rupert Lowe has had the whip removed, which means he is officially no longer an MP for the Reform Party. He is still an MP though. The whip just means you know, you are an official member of Parliament for whatever party. But I was chatting to Dan about this, and it's very interesting because we started looking through Companies House. So I'll give you the brief history of how the party was sort of set up, and why that gives a possibility for Reform members to oust Farage, should they wish to do so. So first of all, Reform itself, as you may have heard, it's actually it's a private company. It's so although it's a political party, it's registered as a company. Now originally it was the Brexit Party, but it later changed its name to Reform UK Party. You can do that once you incorporate a company, which now costs £50. I remember when it was £13, because I've incorporated a lot of companies over the years. They always end up like having a name with brackets, sort of company to company to avoid SDLT Limited. But they established a company, and it was a regular company with shares, and there were a number of shareholders initially, and they were sort of, you know, senior members of the party. And ultimately the party ended up with 15 shares being distributed by people. And like I say, that was just a regular private company. They adopted the Model Articles of Association, which you can do when you incorporate a company, which just sets up a very sort of basic way of running a company. That, you know, it has officers of the company, that's the directors, and members of the company, that's the shareholders, and the shareholders have ultimate control. I mean, you look at somebody, it's what we call the PSC, the person with significant control, and that's either the majority shareholder or somebody who is authorised by the company to, you know, hire and fire directors. I mean, as the name suggests, it's just who actually has de facto control of the company. But very, very recently, they incorporated another company called Reform 2025 Limited. And that is a company limited by a guarantee and not shares. So that's another way of incorporating a company, and I'll come on to how that works. But these 15 shares in Reform UK, they were transferred to Reform 2025. So Reform 2025, as another company, owns the company that is Reform UK Limited. So that company ultimately owns the party. But like I say, that's a company incorporated by guarantee. So they don't issue shares. They still have directors. So they're the officers of the company. But who are the members of the company? Well, they're basically anybody who is like a member of the party. That's how they've decided to do it. Because when you, I mean, companies incorporated by guarantee are quite common, and they usually run for like non-profit. So say for instance you've got like a fan club for a sports team or something, it would be a good idea to set it up as a company limited by guarantee, and the membership, you could say the members of this company are anybody who's in good standing, who've paid their subs this year, they're not in arrears, and they haven't done anything to bring the organisation into disrepute. Companies who set up like this, they have to, on demand, give a list of who all the members are. Now, I don't know who the members of Reform 2025 are, because I haven't gone so far as to actually ask them to provide the list. But the members effectively have all the same powers as shareholders would have. They can ultimately hire and fire the directors. And like I say, it's quite common that with when you've got just like members, you can have thousands and thousands of them, which normally on a private limited company as opposed to a public company, you wouldn't have thousands of shareholders. You know, you might have one, or you could have just one if it's a sole operation. You could have a few if it's a family. You could have a couple of hundred if it's a sort of relatively complex business. But with companies limited by guarantee, it's very common to have thousands and thousands of members. So under company law, those members get to pick and choose who the directors are. And who are the directors of Reform 2025? They are Nigel Farage and Mohammed Yusuf. So the members could just, they've got two ways of doing this. They could just under company law ask for a meeting of the members, and they could vote and they could say, right, on a simple majority, we wish to replace the directors with different people. So that's one way they could get rid of Nigel Farage as a director of Reform 2025. They could just basically vote him out of the directorship. Now, of course, he'd still be a member of the party, he could still be an MP, but he would no longer be in control of that party. So that's one way they can do it. Another way they can do it is under Reform's constitution, if 50% of the members vote, ask for a vote of no confidence. It can either be 50% of the members, or it could be 50% of the MPs, but only if they've got 100 MPs in Parliament at the time. So obviously they've only got, 5? So that won't count at the moment. But the members could say, we want a vote of no confidence. So who actually votes on that? Well, then it's the board of the company. And Reform 2025's board is set up, there are 8 people in total. So there are 3 regular members, three people who are just voted on from the membership. They can stand for election and say, I'd like to be on the board, and people vote for them. So that's 3. They have to have 3 people who are effectively MPs or former MPs. Or actually, not necessarily with Reform, they just have to have held elected office. And then there's the party chairman, and the party secretary, or some other sort of ex officio office. So there's ultimately 8 people who decide on whether there is a vote of no confidence. Now, interestingly, of course, Nigel Farage is on the board, but he wouldn't be allowed to vote because he'd effectively be voting on his own, whether he stays or goes. So that's 2 possible ways that the members could oust Farage from being a director of the company. And they can just put in who they want. Like I say, that wouldn't actually stop him being an MP or anything. But it'd be interesting to see if anybody actually does that. Like I say, I've no idea how many members there are at the moment. Perhaps somebody out there, if you really want to follow this story, maybe write to Reform and say, please, as you're obliged to do under the Companies Act, provide me with a list of all your members. And then we'd know how many of the people there were. And also, you can just look through the Constitution and sort of establish how to set up one of these meetings. I mean, it could be an emergency general meeting of the members. So there you go. I mean, like I say, it's an interesting one. I mean, I'm also looking at, because I started looking at this as a potential defamation story, because that's sort of actually something I might know a little bit about. But I just thought this was quite interesting, and I do a little bit of company law. I'm not very good at it, but I have incorporated a lot of companies over the years. And it's all very interesting how they work, sort of companies limited by guarantee, companies limited by share, community interest companies. I've set a few of those up in my time. I mean, it's all very interesting stuff. Well, I hope it is. I hope it's at least vaguely interesting, and as always, vaguely informative, vaguely accurate. But yeah, just something to contemplate. And what I'll do is I'll follow all this fallout. I mean, like I say, it's not really something that particularly interests me. And stuff. I'll have a look on Twitter and see who's rowing with who and who's putting aspersions on people. And if I can get something out of it, I'll do a defamation video on the back of it.